evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
89.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, Mark.
Joined as well by our owner and projectionist extraordinaire, Jeff. Say hello, Jeff.
Good night, Dick.
Once again, I point out that it's a laugh-in reference. He's not insulting Virgil.
No, I'm not insulting Virgil, no.
Googling laugh-in. And you guys know it. We are ever expanding with the ideas that we have at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, trying to keep it fresh, trying to keep our finger on the pulse. And, sometimes these ideas come from within, as we have some experts in certain fields that seem to rise to the occasion. But in this case, we're talking books today. We obviously are a mecca for 35mm film, classic programming that can't be touched. But, a lot of that source material comes from really amazing books. And our fan base certainly has a crossover. Somebody who appreciates classic film presented on 35mm with a deep appreciation and insight into that film. Certainly maybe into the novelizations of those films or just reading in general. So we came up with this really fun idea. Thanks to Sandy, who is our third guest on the podcast. Say hello, Sandy.
Hi, everyone.
I always have everybody say hi so the audience can know what somebody sounds like. But in this case, it's pretty easy to tell which one's Sandy. So
Right.
People normally can hear me from across the lot. They know when it's me. So, I have a very distinct voice.
But as you guys know from a previous podcast, Sandy is not only our loving Mahoning merch manager, she is also Professor Dr. Eckerd. So we decided to put our heads together on how we could appease this audience that we have never tapped into before on a book level. So, Sandy, why don't you tell the people what we've come up with?
I think it's a pretty great idea.
It's an incredible idea. I don't know why we haven't done it sooner.
I know. I don't know either. So we've been talking about having our very own book club. And this would not be like a class. This is designed just to be fun and, light, so that people can talk about things that they've read. So it kind of makes you feel like you're at the Mahoning, all month long while you're reading your book. You can think about, hey, I definitely want to bring that up. So we're going to start what we're going to call the Mahoning Book Club with our first pick, which is going to be Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Perfect. And then that way people can read the book on their own. We might have a little giveaway here or there to entice people to maybe win a copy of the book. And then we're going to meet at the drive-in and talk about it that night so that we can have a good time and say, these are the things that we noticed in the book. And I have found that just talking about the parts of a story that you really like, you can go off on that and enjoy talking about characters or talking about differences between the book and the movies, or it might even, inspire someone to see a version of the movie that you might not have seen. I know, with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, some people have seen the 1978, but maybe have never seen the 1956 version of the movie. So it's just, something that could really be fun. And I think a nice addition that we've not tried this before.
It's a perfect extension to what we do, very much like the Sunday Essential series that we started last year. The whole idea of that was kind of taking the Mahoning programming into a film school level, bringing in film scholars to talk about the movie, bringing in authors to introduce the movie. And it was so incredibly well received. And I think the thing that it really made us discover is how much people take these stories into their lives, even though they're coming and wearing that fandom to enjoy that 2 hours on our lot. that fandom runs so much deeper and that appreciation runs so much deeper. So the idea of us digging our teeth into this and opening up the books, it makes total sense. I'm just thinking about it. We have Carl Gottlieb coming out this year for our very first screenwriter spotlight. And that mixed with your already love of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it started this conversation where it's like, there's connective tissue here. And it happens more often than not. I'm actually thinking of past events that we ran that could have been perfect, for it. So where does Invasion fall for you? Like, I know, is it part of your criteria or something that you like to work into your classes?
I've taught it in a lot of different ways because I really find that the book itself, it's a reasonable length of a book. It's not super thick and intimidating to look at it. It's usually a really quick read. And I have found it's a very accessible sci-fi novel, especially for people that don't necessarily like science fiction. Sure. So for me, I would say of the 2 books that I would call my very favorite books of all time that I reread more than any other book, this is one of the 2.
Wow.
So I think it is. I think it's a great story. And everyone that knows me, if you went to the 24-hour marathon that Harry ran and like the credits start rolling, like everybody with me whips their head around to go like, he's showing Body Snatchers. I'm like, no way. And then everybody's like, shh.
Immediately, quiet.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the story is a timeless story that you can adapt it for whatever society is the needs or the issues that you see, which is probably what we're going to talk about today. What is very universal about this story that you can retell it in new ways over and over again. And that's what I really like about it.
It's one of those concepts that has become timeless. It's such a strange thing to think about how fresh it may have been in the 50s. But then you also look at the landscape in the 50s as far as books and cinema, and it was overrun with sci-fi. 56 specifically was a monstrous year for sci-fi titles. So it really made sense why this kind of rose to the top. But I agree with you. Reading this book in college, I felt like it was so digestible, Not only is it a great, easy read, it feels very simplistic in its writing, but he's very descriptive as well. It has these great kind of beautiful grandeur descriptions. I found it to be so entertaining, especially for a book that could, potentially play dated, being that it is an older title.
But I think that that's what's fun to really talk about. The things that, she talks about getting a divorce as if it's like the end of the world in the story. And, like to have those conversations about how things have changed with the way society views life. Because the point of the book, really, of all the versions of the story, is about the meaning of life. Like, what does it mean to be human? And, if we could be happy all of the time, but empty, is that really living? Because sometimes it's the pain and sometimes it's the journey and the struggle that really make the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really what I find attractive about this story is that, she is dealing with this major issue in her life of I've gotten divorced and, like I'm coming back to my hometown and I'm going to live with my parents. And, and back in the 50s, that wasn't necessarily so bad, but, she's struggling and then she meets an old flame. And that relationship is what kind of ties the 2 of them together, is that, they both are at this stage of their lives now where they're dealing with like, well, what do I want for the next act? And I think we all have those moments. So whether it's 1950s or it's, today, I think that that's really what's relatable about the story.
And that's a good segue. I know that the original book introed in its original year. The version that I read, it introed as a 70s book or a 70s story. Now, I'm sure that was a tie-in with the new adaptation that was coming out. I guess, was that a thing, a re-release thing that Jack Finney did?
It's a very interesting story, I think, and I hinted at this in the other podcast that we did. Basically, he wrote this story back in the day. A lot of writers couldn't getting a book deal was a really rare thing, and I guess that's true today too. To be able to get a book, you need to have established that you're going to sell said book, before they're going to just give you a huge contract to write a book. So a lot of really good writers would start off as a serialist, and they would write for a popular magazine. And a magazine that was really popular back in the day was Collier's Magazine. And he ran this story as an installment, like a newspaper installment, from November of, I wrote it down, 1954 to December of 1955. 1954 to 1955. So he had this serial that people loved. It was so popular that they ran it twice. Then, of course, they said, well, let's make a book deal out of it. So in that amount of time, think about how short a time frame this was, that he wrote this, that was a monthly or a weekly installment. Then they ran it again. And at the same time, they decided to write it as a book. And the film was started in pre-production that same year. So that by 1956, the film has come out.
Insane.
So then he had to rewrite it to put it in this format. And then in the 1970s, they decided, well, you know what, we should update this. So they literally updated the story to be more of a 1970s story without taking away any of the main themes from the 50s.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't remember anything else that was oh my gosh, this is totally a 70s toss in to make it modern. But definitely that opening line where you're like, wait a minute, how is it possible? But then again, it is a timeless story in that sense that it could totally be opening in 2023. It's still a horrifying concept. So,
well, I mean, I'm one of the few people that I still teach it because I really still like it, but I'm the minority that thinks The Invasion is actually a really great film. You see where they switch directors. 3/4 of the way through, they were really saying, this isn't going fast enough. We need a big action scene. You literally see where they switched directors and added this weird action sequence there at the end with a car and things blowing up and stuff. Yeah. But before that, I felt it was a really good, quiet film about real issues of life and humanity. But then, of course, we have to add an action sequence. But I still really love the movie, and I think it updates it really well. I know, I'm in the minority.
But it's a bold choice to see just the main character totally swapped, where it's just okay, we're going to see this from a female perspective versus a male perspective. So I could totally see both sides. I'll be totally honest, I don't know if I ever saw that Nicole Kidman movie all the way through. Maybe pieces, but I got to get on it. I mean, I might be missing something. I hear James Bond is also in that film.
Yes, secret feature. And I'm telling you, what was really fun the couple of times that I would teach this, I don't tell anybody, we would have already read the story and we would have watched one or two of the other adaptations. So I just start the movie as if we're just watching another adaptation. And so first of all, everybody's like, oh, look, it's James Bond. Oh, this is great. And then when they meet, they're like, wait a minute, he's the damsel in distress in this story. It blows their mind. And we would have so many conversations about role reversals and how, she is the center of the story as opposed to the man. So I really do think I love the story myself. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a great kind of turn, where it's this is a timeless story. This is something that's been effective for generations. Let's find a new way to tell it, So it definitely freshened the story without a doubt.
Mark, which one is your favorite version? Do you have a favorite version?
I've seen 3 of the 4. I've also never seen The Invasion. I think the 78 might be my favorite. The 50s is great. And in another podcast, we're going to keep referencing all these other podcasts where we talked about this stuff. In another podcast, we did talk about this, and I had a great experience theatrically with the 50s version. It's a good late night, quiet, creepier movie. But that 70s version, there's a sense of dread and something being just wrong from the opening of that film before the weird stuff even overtly starts happening. So I think I like the 70s one. And it is amazing how this film can speak to new audiences, or at least Hollywood thinks it can, about every 20 years or so. So I think we're about due for another one if 2004 was the last time we saw one of these.
I'm sure it's in
2007, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, 2007. I had to look at my notes. But, it's also interesting whenever you think about what was the major fear in society at the time for each of the adaptations that Mark just kind of brought that sense of dread. That was right around the time that people stopped believing in the government because, we had the whole incident with Watergate and people weren't feeling as safe and secure as they had been in previous years. So in the 50s, it was the Cold War and fears about Russia sending spies and things to take over. Then in the 70s, we've got the government has let us down and things aren't what we thought they were. And then you literally can pinpoint right in 2007, it was when we were starting to get the flu vaccine and diseases that we were like, oh, what is this,
bird flu pandemic.
Yeah. So you can see how they take advantage of that. Like, oh, they're going to go get a shot, because you guys haven't seen the 2000. Shame. Secret feature, guys. Secret feature.
That's right. I love it.
But yeah, so that they're always like, they're going to go get a shot. And it's like, but that's what people were really worried about at that point, because that was all new to think you were going to go get a shot as a vaccine against something. Even though we'd been doing vaccines for forever, this was when we were introducing something new. So that's, again, another way that they kind of update the story by taking something that the society as a whole was scared of.
And one of the great things, too, about all these different remakes of this one story, different adaptations of this one story, is that they don't all do it exactly the same way. It's not those giant pods over and over again in every one of these movies. And whether, I like some more than others, but it's not the same film. You could watch this 4 times in a row, and it would be really interesting every time just to see what the methodology is and what they're speaking to. And the 70s has the whole est and self-help thing kind of going on where everybody's looking to find themselves through whatever means. I mean, Nimoy more or less plays one of those kind of characters. And we're talking primarily about the 50s and the 70s version. As we said, there's the Abel Ferrara version in the 90s and then the version in the early 2000s. I only can speak of those first 2, but they're so good. And I still have never read the book. How different is the book from the serialized version? I would presume the serialized version wasn't as long.
Wasn't as long, but it's the basic same framework. He just made transitions to make it fit together more so than just like cliffhanger, you know what I mean? Like it would be more of a flow between the chapters and ideas. But what I think the big difference is between the book and the movie version of the 50s, I don't want to say what it is, but I will say the ending is slightly different.
And I actually know the production of the original, there was big kind of discussions about how the film should end. And I know at a certain point it was going to have kind of the dire ending, the pointing at the screen ending. But I do remember my intro before I read the book was definitely the 78 version. And going into it, I was very much expecting, the dogs to show up, the screaming aspect to be in it. That's not in any of the book. I think definitely that 50s version did a pretty damn good job of sticking with that source material. Maybe some...
It is. It's very, very close to the source material. I would say that you just get more character development. And again, without giving it away, a little bit of a different ending. So that to me it shows the difference between ending a book and ending a movie where you want people to kind of like leave the theater talking about the ending of the movie.
Well, Jack Finney, I mean, he's no stranger to Hollywood. He actually had several films made from his works: 5 Against the House, House of Numbers, Assault on a Queen. But this is by far his masterwork,
Yes. Every time I teach horror and fantasy, I teach this as my novel. And I really do think he hit upon what good sci-fi should do. When I teach science fiction, I always say that the point of science fiction is that we're dealing with an everyday problem, an everyday thought that you have right now, today in your world, but you're adding something that forces you to think outside that realm. That's what a good sci-fi story should do, because it's really something that you would grapple with, but you don't quite know how to deal with it because of this external factor.
Yeah.
And he takes that very simple, like the book is a simple book about two people that see each other. One's coming back home from like one's a doctor who's got a very normal, calm life. And it takes this idea and just magnifies, what do we do next with, oh, by the way, we're going to get invaded by aliens. And what do you do if people start acting different? Like, are you really you? Is the personality that makes you there, or can you be yourself if you don't have all of those quirks that make you yourself? And I think sometimes, that's what annoys people about other people is the quirks or the things that, get on your nerves. But like that part of you is the part that makes you human.
Absolutely. I think it does a great job with the evolution theme, the loss of humanity. I mean, for me, just like I've talked about many a times with Fire in the Sky, it's the unknown factor, like that works on me so hard. Just the idea of like, what's out there, and I think for audiences, that was just so ripe on their minds, and there wasn't a better go-to story than the what's out there, what's beyond the stars, as we saw with sci-fi in the 50s and beyond, But where was your introduction to this? Was it the book first? Was it the movie and then exploring the book like me?
I don't even know which one. I would guess it would be the movies, because I've told this story before that my grandmother and I, when my parents would want to have like a date weekend or something, they would send me over to my grandmother's house. And, my mom would, of course, say she needs to be in bed by 7:30. Don't let her watch anything scary, and my grandmother and I would stay up until, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning watching old black and white Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man. So I am betting that it was probably the movie that I saw first. And then I read the book, because I was a voracious reader when I was a kid. I used to be able to tackle a book every day or every other day.
Wow.
I mean, I wished I had that much free time now, but I do not. But, like that's one of the best things about the book club is that then it would force you to say, I have a deadline that I'm really going to read this. Yeah. As opposed to putting it on your shelf and saying, I'm going to get to that, and then you never do. But, I'm pretty sure for me, it was probably the movie and then the story.
Yeah. What do you get into when it comes to the teaching of this book? I mean, do you go in with the idea of, I want to let certain themes wash over these people and then really hammer it in their head? Or do you let them watch it and then surprise them with these theories or notions?
I'm the organic, wash over them people, So I feel like I want them to experience the book or a story or a poem, whatever it is that we're reading or watching, for themselves. I'm not one of those that there's one right way to read a book or there's one right way to watch a movie. So I usually let my students, or even a book club, like, let's talk about what you want to talk about first. And then I pull from that. But I will tell you that the consistency usually is fears of society, women's roles. I mean, usually the ladies in my class would have a lot to say about Becky Driscoll in the 50s versus Nicole Kidman's Carol, and how she is very much her own agency. She knows what she wants to do, and she's going to save her kid at any cost. She is going to win. And I think that, being able to compare and contrast the different versions also adds depth to that. So whatever you would find of interest, whether it's the science or, the humanity issue, or it's the idea of a life choice, like everybody can pick what they want to find in it and then have a rich discussion about that.
I've talked about it. I'm pretty sure we talked about it before. In film school, it was called Literary Vision of Film. And we would just watch a movie and discuss it. And the themes that you could start picking out of films, it really did open my eyes as a writer and open my eyes just as a viewer of film. And that's what I really love about the crossover. And whenever we can play something with such ripe material to pull from. I mean, anything else that you can, kind of point to as far as your love specifically of the book? Any choice kind of moments or memories with the book?
I think for me, it's also the love story that these two people find each other. Like, it's not a sexual love story. It was the 50s after all.
Sure.
But it was very much like two people finding each other and realizing that, you can fall in love again after you've had a bad experience in love. And as I've gotten older and my versions of what I think it means to be in love have grown and changed and matured, I have found even more in that story that I like to talk about too. So I might say that besides the obvious facts of like aliens invading and what makes us human in the end, is being completely at peace all the time the only thing that matters. There's a big scene at the end of the invasion that nobody has seen but me, where it's like the world has gone back to where it was, and they're watching the news on TV and people are fighting with each other again in other countries, and somebody else goes to war with somebody and they're like, yep, guess we're back to normal now. And I'm like, that to me is like one of those moments where it's like, you never really think about what it means to have personality or to have what you think is right. Like that, all of those conflicts add up to who we are inside too. Yeah. So those are the two things that I think I really like out of the story, and that I think would be really fun to talk about.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up, because I do remember from reading the story, the Miles and Becky relationship, they're in the middle of everything. The invasion is happening. They know what's going on to a certain extent. And he's almost like hitting on her at a certain point, where I'm like, what a weird time to start like throwing the Mac down. We're being invaded. Get your mind in the game.
But I think it's because they realize that, like, we only have today. Like, I think the bigger point is that we all wait for the perfect moment. We all wait for, like, when life gets better, I'm going to lose weight, or, you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is that we want, we keep saying we'll do it tomorrow. And he realizes, if I love her, I need to tell her that today, because we might not be here tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I would love to revisit this, but you know what? I'm going to join a book club, I think. And
I think you need to join the book club.
I'm in it just for the library card. I mean, you know how I feel about tchotchkes.
We're gonna get a little library card, and we'll figure out different perks. I mean, like, if Grady wants to come and hang out, that would be a nice little perk. Or if Carl wants to come and hang out. I am a big fan of the Jaws log. I own one of the rare ones. I think it's on Amazon for like $285 now. I have a copy of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, these kind of dream bookings happen more often than not now, where this is really a great way to kind of tap into it. And we have a great way to present it. It would be one thing if it was like, hey, Verge is going to be leading a book club, but we have an actual professor doing it.
But we don't want to scare people off either. This is for fun. You read it, you don't have to take notes on it.
Right.
It's all about just sharing what you liked in the book and talking about things that organically happened that you're like, I really just thought that was really interesting. Or just like our discussion right now, it's like having your own version of the podcast.
Yeah, I love it. It's, again, a perfect extension to what we do. Well, how about you, Mark? I know you have maybe not the experience with the book, but certainly with the movies. Is there anything specifically that you wanted to jump into when it comes to the adaptation?
I was just thinking while we were talking here, one of the things about this that's atypical of, let's say, the 50s version of this movie is that the monster is us. The evil entity is your friends and family and neighbors who suddenly are different, and something is wrong, and they're very friendly. They're not aggressive. They're very calm, and they just want you to just join us. It'll all be fine. Just go to sleep. It'll be fine. And it's really unsettling that, and if you explain it to somebody, man, my neighbors, they were being nice to me. They wanted me to come over for a picnic, and I was like, gone. It doesn't make any sense.
Who are
in
these
the context
freaks?
of the movie, it's just something's off. As you say, the personality traits are gone. The emotion is drained. Everyone is just the same. And that's creepy because, as you said, our differences are what make us interesting and compelling. And in the 50s, it was conformism, or it was, suburbanism or communism or some other kind of ism. In the 70s, it was something else. And it's just that. It's that calmness, that constant reassurance. You see that in movies about cults too, where it's just like, it's all fine. No, it'll be fine. No, the exit, don't worry about the exit. Just come further into this labyrinth with me. So that's what always got me about these films.
And I think that, again, talking about the double feature that we're going to be having on the 5th, this is a dream come true double. We've talked about how much this original means to us. I still, even when it came to reading the book in high school, the voice I hear in my head is Kevin McCarthy's voice.
Definitely.
It's just one of those things that's inescapable now. It's kind of connected with that character. And, we said it in the description that remake is super stellar. And for a lot of people is their intro into the story. But man, does that original hold up so hard. And I can't wait to see it in all of its glory on 35 millimeter up on the massive Mahoning screen. It's going to be great.
We talked about this maybe in my original podcast, but I think we talked about how I feel like Donald Sutherland had a moment in time where he was like the it guy.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, like, he's certainly not the most handsome guy. He's not Keanu Reeves, my man, Keanu Reeves. But, there was just something about this time period with Donald Sutherland, like this movie and Clute. I mean, I just really felt like he definitely had a vibe going in the 70s. And he really does, I think, pull it together that you're really rooting for him. And when you get to the end, again, not to ruin it for anybody else, that's what makes the end hit you so hard, is you're like, no!
When he stubs his toe, you feel for him in the end of that film. Right. And you're like, the man, he made the poor choice for open-toed shoes when the curbs were made of solid granite. And I've said too much. I'm sorry.
That darn San Francisco hill, those hills,
I'm trying to save it.
Well, that's another thing.
I really like the 70s version too. And I think that's another thing, all of them are good. Like, I'm not as big a fan of Body Snatchers. Like, it would be 4th on my list of the 4. But it's a fine film. It's a good film. It deviates so much from the original source material because it follows a teenage girl. It's very much in that Buffy the Vampire Slayer realm of like the teenage girl who's going to solve her own problems. And, and I like it, but it's not quite the same as this story that we're looking at the thread that goes through.
Yeah.
But I really just think that no matter how you slice it, it's a great story and fun to talk about.
Yeah. The Abel Ferrara always felt more concept than content. I don't know if that makes sense, where it's like, hell, even with this story in general, it's like there's enough concept there that, you could pepper in some occasional content there and it's still an amazing story. But the thing I do love about it is it's very whimsical. Like I said at the beginning, it's an easy read. It's not like you're digging into the dictionary to figure out what this guy's talking about. But it has a very lyrical, beautiful flow to it as well that makes it so digestible,
It's a really good story for people that don't even necessarily like to read.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask, I don't remember the version that I read, but is it out there under both titles, Invasion of the Body Snatchers and just Body Snatchers, as far as the book?
I believe that you can look it up as either. I haven't looked it up lately, but I think that you can find it under either one. The original title of the story was The Body Snatchers.
Right.
And then when they made it into the novel, then it became Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Man, I cannot wait to jump into this double feature. It's going to be crazy.
With a secret feature.
Yeah. You guys might have to get that extended pass. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but along with the book club, we had the great Tom Bafuco work on a really cool design to introduce book club to everybody. And Sandy, did you guide this, or was this just out of
Oh
town?
yeah, I totally called him on the phone and I said, "Hey, by the way."
Make it a book. Make it have a bookmark.
Well, I mean, we went through a bunch of different, we messaged on Messenger back and forth about it. And, one of my things was, can we put my car, like the book driving the car? And he's like, so we could do that in the future. Like, so we have ideas about how we could make different versions of this little mascot. So we're calling him Bookmark. And Mark had a clever idea when he wrote it to me. He wrote it with 2 capitals in there so that it would be Bookmark. Get it?
Oh, that's great.
It was cute. So, we'll have our own little mascot and, maybe he will become something in the future someday.
Yeah.
But then that way we will have that, and we'll also be able to, put that on our cute little library card that we're going to give our members. So I think it makes it different that we're going to actually, I think create something fun here. And I think that people that join will be able to read a variety. I won't always, just pick something that's my personal favorite. We'll see organically how it goes and how many people show up. And, if we see something coming up that just happens to fit with a book or a connected book, we'll throw another book club in.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's such a big community around us that, again, we haven't played into directly. And it's a really great idea because not only locally are there a ton of amazing artists, but just the idea of us continuing to bring that flavor to the Mahoning, the idea of us doing these intros or these, scholar kind of in-depth events, I don't think they're going anywhere. So I think this will be a nice ongoing perk for anybody who's into it. Why don't we tell people, do you have a structure in place if they're interested? Do they reach out?
Well, we're still working out all the details. We want to make sure that it's as smooth as possible and it won't interfere with our event or everyone getting to be able to buy their food and buy their souvenirs for the evening. So we're still working out all of the details. If you want to email me at my new email address, to make it easy to find it would be Mahoning Book Club, all one word, at gmail.com.
It sounds so pretty. I love it. Well, Jeff, I don't want to keep you out. What was your experience with either the book or with the films? Do you have that memory of experiencing either?
Yeah, the later installment, the one from the 70s. I think I did see the 56 version, but it was so long ago I don't remember much about it. But I remember being really impressed with the 78 version. I really did enjoy that. And I haven't seen that one in a long time either, but I would like to see it again. I just really enjoyed that version.
It definitely was the intro, like I said, and then going back, I loved playing that original at the video store and just having that be the images that you see when you come into the video store. Very inviting. I do love that original $400,000 budget, humongous opening. I want to say it made over $1 million in that first opening, which back then, that was no small feat. Released in Super Scope. You guys have any knowledge of Super Scope?
I think it was just another form of CinemaScope. CinemaScope, I think, was exclusive to 20th Century Fox at the time, and this was it United Artists, Allied Artists, Warner Brothers? Yeah. One of those studios that wasn't Fox that put this out.
Right.
Funny enough, I forgot to mention earlier, one of my connections with Body Snatchers is that my childhood bedroom to this day has an Invasion of the Body Snatchers poster hanging up in the closet that I got when I was like in junior high or high school because I liked the movie and because it's such a great classic poster, that hand with the 2 leads like running away.
Yes.
So, yeah. If you go to my mother's house right now and you part her clothes that are in my old closet, Body Snatchers poster is still there.
That thing's probably worth a pretty penny now, my friend.
I don't know. It's the kind you would get at like a record store or something. Not an original, but it was a very nice reprint.
Hey, very cool. Very cool. Well, Sandy, is there anything else that you want to cover or maybe let people know why this is an enticing book to pick up, even if they're not close enough to get in on the book club?
Well, I think that they would just enjoy the story and seeing, themselves. Like we've talked about the idea of what makes you, you. If we were happy all of the time, would our lives be better or worse? Because happiness usually, when we find real joy, it's because now it's sweet. That we had a struggle and an uphill battle that led us to the point where we're happy about something. your life is always this way. Do we really know what joy is? And I think that the book, no matter when you read it in your life, whether you're a teenager or you're a grown-up, I think there's something you could find in it that you would like, even if you're not necessarily a sci-fi reader, because the book really feels more like an everyday novel than it does a sci-fi story until you get to that point where, oh, wow, look at this. This is interesting. So, but it feels very approachable and readable, I think.
Yeah, it is not intimidating. It's not like picking up a Philip K. Dick book and being like, I'm just going to casually read this. It's a much easier pill. But we've said it many a time before. You are the joy of the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We're so happy whenever you can join us. Hopefully this just becomes a regular thing and we can have you on talking about the upcoming shows. We want to have Carl on. It would be great to bring you on with Carl. And,
yay. We can argue about Zack Snyder. That would be great.
Not that Carl. I meant Carl Gottlieb. Yes.
I know. I was teasing you.
Carl hates everything. It's a fact.
Carl hates everything.
That's right.
Oh, no, I would really love that. I'm really hoping that he would want to come to book club. No, seriously. He would really, I think it would be really a great perk that he could talk about his thoughts writing it, what he remembers about it in a way that, that's a piece of history. Because Jaws is just such a quintessential movie that everyone should see. So that would be utterly amazing.
Yeah, and do not miss out on that one. Mark, what's the date on Jaws and the Jerk with Carl Gottlieb? We'll give people a nice extended to get into this. Versus Snatchers, which feels like it's coming up like tomorrow, No,
don't rush it. I still got to finish the semester.
That show, we're talking about the Jaws show?
Yes.
The Jaws and Jerk show. I'm saying this as I look it up. It's me verbally killing
scrolling.
Talk amongst yourselves while I scroll. I closed the window. So
while Mark is scrolling, I will just say that stay tuned for some PR on social media. We'll try to squeeze something in. Mark and I were working on that. Maybe we'll have a post where you can comment if what your favorite moment in the movie or in the book, or if you always wanted to read the book or something like that. And then we'll randomly pick someone from that to win a copy of the book. So, Mark, did I stall enough time there for you?
Excellently done. Done like an educator, filling out time until the bell rings. You'd think I would know the date, because the date is before a show that we're not here to talk about that is very important to me. So it is going to be Friday, June 23rd is the Carl Gottlieb Screenwriter Spotlight with Jaws 75 and The Jerk 79. Both written by Carl Gottlieb.
Yeah, and really excited. I mean, coming from such a love and passion of screenwriting, to actually focus on such a legend for our first screenwriter spotlight is kind of mind-bending. So really looking forward to having him out and hearing the stories that he has to tell. So if you guys are interested, be sure to email Sandy to get in on the book club. And of course, MahoningDIT.com for all the dates, deets, and ticks. And I think this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for making the time, Sandy, and the boys, of course.
It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Always a pleasure. All right, on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.